So let's say you're in a leadership role, whether it's a team lead or a project lead or a something, and you want to start getting your team ready for something like this. What Meredith, what's your advice to that person? I'm like, all right, do you start by writing it down? Do you just think about, well, if I was going to take a 2-week trip to Europe, who's going to need to do what? And let's go ahead and loop them into those meetings. Do we write the documents first and then have the meetings? Do we talk to the people and then write the documents and then do that? Like, where do you start if you don't want to wait for your organization to decide succession planning is important and you want to do it for yourself, for your team?
Yeah. So, there's number one is I'm going to back you up further than that. And when I back you up further than that, what I mean by that is I want you to first and foremost, I want you to develop your leader avatar. And what I mean by that is when you think of the best leaders, just like you build an ideal customer profile, you know who your best customer is. You need to know who your best leader is, because a leader that's the right fit for your organization won't necessarily be the right fit for my organization. So you need to begin by building your avatar. What qualities, what characteristics do they have? So that you're starting out with kind of at least 50% of the way there, right? You're starting with the right skill sets and right values and right characteristics. Because if you're just going to, I think that's another place where people make a mistake. They look at hiring leaders and they look at resumes, and resumes don't tell you how somebody would act in a situation. They don't tell you, the things that really make the difference with a leader. So you need to start with your avatar. And then once you know your avatar, you're looking out at your organization and, first of all, coaching people according to that avatar. You need to put the value in the organization on that avatar. Here's what we're looking for. I call it a criteria for advancement. Here's what we're looking for in our future leaders. And let's talk about what skills you have, what skills you don't have, and what skills you need to learn, and you need to develop in order to become that avatar.
Okay, so you got a leader avatar, and that's where you start. And I'm really thinking about the person, because oftentimes we as intelligent workers know that succession planning is important. If for nothing else, then we want to take 2-week vacations and not have to check our work email while we're gone. So like it starts with that kind of simple look, but like where do we start besides the ideal avatar? Then what? Where do you go from there?
Well, first of all, let's assume that I had my ideal avatar. I'd sit down and I would have a gap conversation with you against that avatar. I mean, I would say, I want you to grade yourself against how you think you come up against this avatar, and I'm going to grade you against this avatar. And then let's work on a development plan for you to become more of this avatar. So basically, I've got you on a development plan to become my successor. But I've had an honest, bold conversation with you about where you're phenomenal as a leader and where you need to develop. And we're working on closing that gap.
Okay. So we got an ideal avatar. We have those gap conversations. Then what?
And then we got to see if you're moving along that continuum. Just because I tell you what you need to develop. I think another place where people make a mistake is they lead people's potential rather than leading the individual. Just because you tell me I have potential to be a leader doesn't mean I'm going to do the things I need to do to become that leader. So you need to get out of my way and see if I rise to the occasion, right? Jack Welch, a legendary leader of G, one reason he always had 3 or 4 successors in mind is he wanted to have a choice. He wanted to pick the best of the best, right?
Sure.
And so you want to have more than a few coming through there. But as you're doing those things, you're slowly getting out of the way. I mean, I mentioned my boss, Jeff. And so what he would do would be he would go on vacation and he would send me to the board meeting. When the chairman of the board was coming in town, he'd have me present in front of the chairman of the board, kind of getting me used to being the leader while he was still there to catch the net.
Sure. At what point in all this do you actually write a succession plan of
I
some
think
kind?
you
Would
should
that have
always have
happened
a succession plan. I think it
in the
needs to
very beginning?
Yeah, I think it needs to be stated somewhere. Now, but a succession plan is not a guarantee. Just because I say
Sure.
I believe that Brian is going to be my successor doesn't mean that Brian's going to be my successor. At any time you could screw up along the way, or somebody more talented could come in,
Yeah.
those things can change. But I think it's important to state it, write it down.